go, the Dirt Simple workbench. It's going to go kind of fast, so let's go. Starting with the top of the rails, the side rails, I'm laminating three 2x4s together and also bolting them. First I'm going to cut them down to length at 80 inches, which is what my solid core door is going to allow me to do. It's going to end up being 83 inches, but more on that later. And then I'm going to go ahead and extend the tape measure again and mark 10 inches in from the end, and that'll be the edge of my built-in mortise, and then 4.5 inches in from that. I'll do that on both ends, just like that, and then I'm going to square off my cutoff length right here and take that over to the chop saw. After that, I'm going to extend the markings from my mortises all the way around, and I'm going to pull a little trick here with a skill saw. And what I intend on doing here is leaving about 3/8 of an inch band in the center of this after I cut the mortise out. And so again on the other side, I'm going to extend that line all the way around and clamp it to the table saw so that I can use my skill saw more safely, oddly enough. Right there I have a shop jig. It's just a straight piece of wood glued to a piece of plywood, and it serves as my guide. Notice here how I move the guide over to the other side, and that's just so the saw actually cuts on the inside of the line that I marked. And that's a good thing to remember when you're using these type of guides or jigs, that your saw cut is actually on the outside of that jig, so you need to orient it to the line appropriately. And right here, what I'm doing is I'm cutting a series of kerfs in between that area, and I'm going to do this on both sides. Here I go, another kerf, and once I get all the way across, I'm going to chisel out that waist. It's not going to be anything pretty, but it's not really important that this is pretty, because that whole centerpiece in between is going to be gone eventually anyway. Well, you see the end result at that point. I have area where the center piece of stock is not going to glue up to the sides, and I actually get a good clean mortise. I guess you'd say mortise cheek. And I'm going to clamp this together and get my alignment right. Right. Oh, you see that big piece of rotwood there. Which you could epoxy that. I'm not really concerned about that, because it's really three 2x4s is really more about both weight and having clamping surface under the edge of the table. And I thought about going out and buying some epoxy, and I don't have any, but I'm not really going to worry about it. Right here, I'm taking a small bit and pretty much making a guide hole. I'm going to put two on the outside of each mortise, and I'm going to put three in the center. Right here, I'm marking 3 inches in from the edge, and then again at 8 inches to as locations for my bolts. And then I spread out the tape again, and that first one was 40, then 20, and then 60, and then I pull out a larger bit. I believe this is a 5/8 inch bit, and put a tape on there for depth, and that's just so I can recess my bolts inside, and then I go ahead and cut out the length of that. Now this bit that I just used was not really long enough to go all the way through the 4.5 inches of stock. So I'm going to dump out the waste there, and I take that small bit again and I put it right in the little valley that the bigger bit creates, and flip it over and use that hole that I just punched to cut with the bigger bit, so I can get the recess for the other side. And I get everything back together and line it up, and notice right there you feel with your fingers to make sure that you obviously that was premature, but make sure you get your alignment good on one end. Then I start the glue up and brush it out. I use a lot of glue. I actually bought a gallon of glue for this project, and I probably ran through maybe a fourth of it, maybe more like a fifth. But there's my bolt and washer. Make sure you use washers for this, because if you depend on the bolt head, number one, you're not going to be able to tighten it down very well because it's just going to bog down in the wood. And even if you could, it would just pull into the wood and sink in. There's my washer for the nut side as well. Put the washer on and then the nut, and then I ratchet that down. I ran into the problem here where I didn't have another socket that would fit. So it was pretty hard to get those bolts lined up. And check this out. All the legs are built up out of 2x6 material, cut down to 4.5 inches wide. I cut it to length first, 29.5 inches for two pieces, and the center piece that actually involves the tenon is 33 inches. And I cut this down to 4.5 on the table saw. Notice my feather board. I don't really have a lot of real estate for a good clamping of a feather board, so this is the best alternative for my setup. Get that out of the way and slap that piece out. Let's see it. Oh, my awesome fence. I have to measure both sides, just like I mentioned in episode 1. Now that I'm all covered in sawdust, I'm going to go ahead and mark out my legs. Now, I took care, it's real easy with the lumber I have because I'm not milling it. It has a weathered side and a not so weathered side. So that helps me keep it straight. But before you cut it down to length, you probably want to go ahead and mark which side is which if you have box store lumber. Now, this is the lumber I'm using, even though I repurposed it. It's still about what you'd expect from a box store in 2x6 lumber, in that it has a little bit of cupping. I went ahead and put all the same face in one direction. Because that cup ran pretty much the length of the whole board, that cupping is going to pretty much fit into each segment of the leg there. Okay, so I pretty much got that set up. I want to go ahead and decide what what I want to be seen from the front, since this rail I'm actually working on is the front part of the bench. And I'm going to choose this non-weathered side. It's a little dirty, but it looks far better than the weathered side of the board. I'm going to go ahead and mark a triangle in that, and I'm going to set that to the side and repeat the same process on the other leg. Well, I've got my shop assistant out here, and she's going to be assisting me with the markings. And the bottom rail of the, the bottom stretcher of the rail is going to be 5.25 inch from the ground. That's the bottom edge of the stretcher. So I've got my tri-square, brand new tri-square. I've got that set to 5.25. We're working on legs. Go ahead and give me a mark right there on the edge of that ruler. Good job. Good job. And we're using 2x4s, which is 3.5 inches. And I'm going to go ahead and use a 1/4 inch shoulder on that. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this up to 5.5 inches. Go ahead and give me a mark right there.